Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes. This is the new account week by week, and we are 26 weeks in, the halfway point for the year. This is what today's topics are. We've got more Grand Arena changes. It looks like CG has finally figured it out. We're going to look at division planning based on that for this account specifically, go over the half-year progress, and then the near and long-term planning from this point forward. First up is the content update, and this is great news. I was expecting to see changes to these Grand Arena divisions because they weren't really thought through from most of the player base's standpoint. I'm glad that we're seeing these before we have to go through a season. I was thinking we'd have to deal with a season of what was previously announced first. I'm glad that's not the case. What I don't like is that they're announcing these changes seemingly without thinking them through, or maybe not creating the space within their company for their employees to bring up these kinds of issues. Because these changes, the issues with the previously announced changes were figured out by the player base within moments of the announcement. There are some pretty glaring issues with the fleet, the number of fleets not extending further into the game, really only affecting the first two divisions. There was that gigantic jump that was happening between divisions 5 and 6 with number of teams that you needed. And with the redistribution of GP, it was really favoring going after a Galactic Legend early and could possibly lock out any player that decided not to go after them beforehand. And then you'd shift at Division 6 into having a Galactic Legend hurting you again. So it was kind of a weird distribution of things that the impacts were clearly not thought through by whoever came up with the ideas and thinking through what the impacts would be. So this time, those issues aren't really there. The number of fleets has been extended down through Division 7, which I think is appropriate. The 3v3 and 5v5 teams is more gradual with the number of teams that you need, where you can easily, as your roster grows, handle those kinds of changes with each change in division. The only jump that is really occurring is in 3v3, going from Division 10 to Division 9. So this is where you have the 4 teams at Division 10 going up to 7 teams at Division 9. And this is going to occur to me within the new account this season. I expect it to happen this season. Probably around week 3, week 4, I'm going to have to deal with that. Right now, I'm at 1.3 million GP. I think it's possible to hit 1.6 million GP within this season of Grand Arena. We'll see if that has an impact. But this is a lot better, and I think this is something that the player base as a whole can agree on and be happy with. And it extends the fun that was going to be for only the upper divisions down through all of them. So I'm glad CG has taken care of that. Last season in Grand Arena, we went undefeated, and we've been able to participate in 2 seasons so far, and we've only dropped a single battle over those 2 seasons. The strategy we've been developing is to pursue multiple high-end teams as quickly as possible and make our roster as strong as possible quickly, instead of overdeveloping some of those early teams that you're able to get over early on. Those single, highly developed teams can be beaten by some of these higher quality teams, so like Geos or Bastila teams. It doesn't make sense to overdevelop those teams when they're easily supplanted by Padme or CLS. So the first 3 teams are what we used last season in Grand Arena, where we were at about 1.2 to 1.3 during that period, and we're going to see a Grand Arena change at 1.6 million GP. But next season, if we're not at that 1.6 million GP, this will be our 4th team that will be required, which will be Night Sisters. They're a great low investment team. And if we hit that 1.6 million GP threshold by the time we hit 5v5 again, then the next team I'll be throwing on defense are Ewoks, because we've been developing and pursuing them for C-3PO because of how great he's going to make a CLS team. And they are troublesome early on because there's not a lot of great counters early on in the game. They're easily supplanted later, but they're going to be a good defensive team to start with. Then as we move on further in the game, we're going to be looking at Newt because they're super tricky on defense, and First Order we're going to be developing because they're great in multiple venues and they're a good early defensive team. For offense, these are the 3 teams that we were using last season: CLS, Palpatine, and Django. Palpatine is the current arena team. We're trying to transition into CLS as my arena team as quickly as possible. They're still a work in progress. Django, because of Chewie, that bounty hunter team is really solid. As we move on to the next couple seasons in Grand Arena, I want to have a trooper team built up. I have better troopers right now, but Moff Gideon is going to be the best option, and had I started the game at a different point, that is definitely the team that I would be pursuing. Bad Batch, I have this bias towards new kits. Even though I'm going to be limited by Kairos, I think at Gear 8, 3 stars, they're going to be a nuisance, and I think I'm going to be throwing some resources at them. But I'm also going to be building up a clone team because these pre-existing clone team is a super low investment team other than 5s and Shock T. You can build them really quickly. I don't have Shock T's node unlocked yet. And then we are also working on getting JKR unlocked, so my Old Republic are going to be built up. They could be thrown on defense. First Order with Hux I could throw on offense. And then I'm also building up a Smugglers team because I want those slicing mats early on to have those compounding effects. Plus there's a lot of good credits in that event, so I'm going to have a decent start on a Scoundrel team that I want. Plus Beskar Mando, even though he's not great yet, he's been specifically designed for new accounts and early players. They're all on earlier nodes. They're all relatively easy to gear, with only Mando requiring a Cairo before Gear 11. And then we're going to have some other progress down the line. Mon Mothma, because we're going to have all these fighters built up for their ships because I'm building a rebel fleet. So having Mon Mothma eventually is going to make a lot of sense. The only thing slowing me down is the slower farm and the 2 Zetas. Like, she's basically useless without the 2 Zetas. She needs both. And then we are slowly working on a JTR team, and they're just so important for a cheap counter for bounty hunters, Old Republic, First Order. They added a lot of flexibility, and I'm able to farm them for the most part, except for the vets, without interfering with other farms, because I've been exploiting the guild store that I've been saying is a really great resource for farming now, which it wasn't before. The shard changes has made the guild store farms cheap, and if you pursue it early enough on, it's not really competing with your gear, because you're not going to have a lot of characters in need of purple gear if you go if you're playing the way that I'm playing, building out in multiple directions. The higher end gear, you're going to need that after Gear 8. I'm kind of working on building everyone at this Gear 8 stage right now. And let's do a quick glance at 3v3. Here's what I'll be using on defense. We're going to need 4 teams at first, and then if we hit 1.6 million GP this season, we'll be jumping up to 7 teams. So that's what we'll be planning around. So Geos, Bastila, Padme, we're looking at them this season. Then Night Sisters, they're a very cheap investment team that I can split into 2 teams. Acolyte will be added into that, the single easiest 2-gear character in the game. And then Newt and First Order. For offense, we've got a Palpatine team, a CLS team, Django and Bounty Hunters. They could go on defense, but right now, because of how powerful and developed they are, I'm using them on offense. And then Ewoks and Troopers. We have a lot of flexibility with offense. Jumping to that 7 teams isn't going to be a huge problem, but we're still thinking about it. And since this is the week 26 half-year milestone video, we're going to spend a little bit more time breaking down the specific faction progress, and we'll finish up with my current projects. So faction-wise, this is what we are currently looking at. 501st, obviously this is a longer-term project that may not even come into play with this account, but we are building up these clones regardless. They're a cheap investment. Bad Batch, we talked about this a moment ago. We're not going to go past Gear 8 because of the Cairo wall. but I still think they're going to be very powerful at that Gear 8 3 stars, at least compared to what my opponents are. Their kits are so powerful, and I have that bias towards new kits that I'm going to bet on them to be a decent counter even at those levels. Bounty Hunters are one of my more developed teams. We're going after Chewie pretty quickly. Django is a great lead without the Zeta, so I'm not even going to put the Zeta on Bosk. Clones we talked about, but here's the rest of them. Droids we're going to skip. They're mainly Separatist. Empire, this is basically just Palpatine, Thrawn, Vader. The troopers we'll talk about in a moment. Thrawn, though, I stopped at 6 stars. He is good enough at 6 stars, and over-investing in the Phoenix early on don't make sense. I will return to Thrawn later on. I'm perfectly happy to use Fracture and Thrawn at 6 stars and not waste those resources, and instead put them on other characters so I can have other squads and factions built out first. Phoenix aren't worth it. And one of those teams being Ewoks. Early on, they're very good, and getting C-3PO is that important to me. So this is currently one of the teams getting a lot of credits and ability mats. But the farms are basically done, except for Wicket. But Wicket, we are now able to beat Endor Escalation with the current characters. I'm going to put an LVT video out about that fairly soon, about what that minimum threshold is to beat that event, because it's a pretty big nuisance. But we are going to get Wicket to 7 stars pretty soon to start farming Zetas. First Order is on the back burner. We're starting to work on Hux a little bit, and Sith Trooper I want for the flexibility of that 2-faction flexibility, because there's actually not a lot of reason to go after Sith early on. Next up is Galactic Republic. This is basically just Padme. We took Padme to 6 stars a week ago, I believe, maybe 2 weeks ago. That was only being held up by not wanting to spend the credits on the Geonosians to promote them. Geonosians by far the best route to unlock Padme early and cheaply. They can do it. I did it at like levels 65 on the Brood Alpha and level 80 on the pilots. I think Pago was like 65 as well. But we're making decent progress. They're not getting a ton of ability mats and credits right now because I'm trying to get C-3PO as quickly as possible. We could have done it quicker, but I've been building them up slowly, and really it's Anakin and Kenobi need a lot of those computers, which is slowing things down a bit. Geonosians, I'm happy with where they are right now. They're good enough, and really what you have with Geonosians and why I wouldn't recommend over-investing in them is you can either beat Geonosians or you can't. So you either have a counter, which is going to work on them, or you don't have a counter and Geonosians are going to beat you. So you don't need to worry about making them super good, because then you are taking resources away from other teams. Like, I'm happy with this. Like, the pilots are expiring in Fleet Arena, but I'm trying to switch over to the Falcon, and the rest of this is good enough. We'll make them better later on, but it's good enough for now. Troopers, we are pivoting. We have Veers. We have a lot of decent troopers built up to a decent level, but I want Moff Gideon built up with Dark Trooper, and right now we're farming them a little bit slowly and throwing some resources at them gradually, but I want to build out a strong trooper team. They're a great low investment counter. Jawas, I just want to show where their farming progress is. This is a long-term thing. I'm not going to give them any resources right now, but I did want to farm them, at least as they didn't interfere with other farms, because they are a cheap geo counter that I want to have in my back pocket later on. Jedi, we've been ignoring for a while. We've been using them on defense. I really want to transition out of them, but we're working towards Jedi Knight Revan. And at that point, they'll start getting some more resources again. But Bastila is At the rate you can farm characters in the game right now, developing a Bastila team beyond minimums, I don't think is worth it, because those resources will expire. That Zeta will become redundant and no longer used. None of that is worth it. Mandos we're skipping. Night Sisters, we got Telzine to 7 stars 2 to 3 weeks ago, I believe, so we're able to farm the Zetas on the Telzine event from this point forward. I think it makes a ton of sense to go after Wicket and Telzine as quickly as possible right away, as soon as it doesn't interfere with other projects that are more important. The Night Sisters are a super low investment squad. They don't expire as a team. You will be using them in the end game. It makes a ton of sense to go after them early on, and they're great in Conquest, great in a lot of other aspects. Old Republic, this is one of the active farming pursuits right now. Other teams are getting ability mats and credits, but the main farms right now are Old Republic. You could go after Jedi Knight Revan earlier, but I just think the duo of CLS and Padme makes more sense to me than going after a single team in Jedi Knight Revan. We're also farming now Jedi Knight Revan and Darth Revan simultaneously, so hopefully like in a month or so we'll be getting them unlocked. What is with this vid? Next up, Phoenix we talked about with Thrawn, Rebels. This is all about CLS. This is one of the big projects is to switch to CLS in Arena sooner than later. We aren't throwing a lot of ability mats at them right now or credits because we need C-3PO unlocked, so Ewoks are getting those resources. But as soon as we hit 5 stars, we're taking the rest of these guys up. My next Zeta is going to be Han. We have him at 82 to put that Zeta on. It's night and day with him with that Zeta, and it's really important to having that team. But because of how many ability mats it takes to put on Zeta, we are holding off until we have C-3PO. Rebel Fighters, this is all about the pilots. We're farming them from the stores that it's cheap and doesn't interfere with other things. Not putting resources on them right now, but we are looking to switch to a Falcon fleet soon. Resistance, Finn and Scavray, farm them out of the guild store. The guild income is high enough where you can get a little bit of gear, you can farm a bunch of characters, and if you do it early on, it won't be interfering with your gearing projects. And right now, my gearing projects are limited to gear 8, so I don't need that other gear as much. It's more important for me to have some of these farms done. And I'm basically done with Rey. Finn will be done soon, and then when I'm done with the Old Republic, I'm going to be able to go after Vet Han and Vet Chewie in the Cantina store, get them unlocked, and then have JTR and have a great counter. Scoundrels, we are way in the background if I have some excess energy, farming Cara Dune and working on Beskar Mando requirements. It's a long bet that something will be useful for him down the line, but it's also because, as I said earlier in the video, Beskar Mando was designed for the early game. So I would like to have him as a luxury. It's not a main focus. Separatist, this is another guild store farm where B2 and IG-100 you can farm pretty cheaply out of the guild store. They are way down in priority. IG-100's been a lot of bronziums, which is why he's as far as he is. Droideka shares a node with one of the ships, I believe, so Droideka has a lot of progress without me doing anything. And Grievous is one of those characters. Every time he appears in the fleet store, you buy him. Have resources on the sideline designated for him. The Newt team I thought I would have had by now, but because of the shard farm changes, there's so many other things you can do that if it hasn't received a ton of focus, it could be another starting team. I was testing out troopers. as an experiment, and now with where you can farm Moff Gideon and Dark Trooper, I would just go for them. That's the route I would recommend. But Newt is such a tricky defensive team that he's worth having, and I will be getting resources toward them at some point. Sith has been really ignored, except for Bastila Fallen for Darth Revan. Sith Trooper I have as a luxury farm because that's the 5th I want to add because it's a nice flex between the First Order faction and the Sith. Sith Empire just completely ignored until Darth Revan is unlocked. And then the smugglers. I do want to start farming Cura after I'm done with some of my current Cantina farms because one, I want to show you the minimums for the Smugglers Run final tier. You can do that without like Nest and some other high-end characters, just with Young Han Solo at gear 8. Kind of a nuisance, but you can do it. And that's a great resource to get those compounding effects for slicing your mods and treating mods like an endgame player, which I highly recommend. And so that is where the farms are. Let me just go over my favorited characters and show you what the current priorities are. So Bastila Shan Fallen, she's shifted into the arena team. She's super good. We're not actively farming Piet right now, but he's still favorited. Bosk, I just want done. It's also just the Houndstooth is that good of a ship. Wicket, I want those Zetas. Mando is for the Bounty Hunter event and get Chewie. Plus, I want him specifically for the lowest viable team video I'm making for Chewie. He's part of the easiest to obtain bounty hunter, high-end bounty hunter team in the game now. Nude is there just as a reminder. I'm not doing anything with him. Chupio is being actively farmed. Canderous I've just switched to as my current Cantina farm. Spirit is in there as a reminder and more for gear, not for shards. Zelbar is one of the active farms that we're pursuing. Hoth Rebel Soldier, that's just a 5-star minimum. It's close enough, and I think it's close enough from Galactic Challenges and maybe Bronziums. I'm not sure if he drops from Bronziums. But it's also just to help out the guild for, I think, the Rolo Shard node in territory battles. You need Hoth Rebel Soldier. That's why I'm going for him just to that minimum. Then Juhani, we explained, and Cardoon, we've explained. And that is where we are at the half-year point in this new account. We've made a lot of progress. We have built out a lot of good high-end squads early, and we have built out a lot of flexibility with the directions that we can go. We're at a point now where I think I can build out my farming strategy video. We've seen the early game changes. That's no longer going to affect the recommendations, and I've seen the errors in the farming that I've done with this account, where I think now I can make an educated recommendation. So I think the next series of videos I'll be working on will be a method series of videos for the new account. I think I can do that now without feeling like I'm going to be revising my recommendations. So thank you for watching. Be safe out there, everyone, and be excellent to each other. This is Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes.